it's my pleasure also to introduce Luiz de Mello. And Luiz is with the policy studies teams and provides leadership and strategic direction within the economics department of OECD, and his policies there which promote stronger, cleaner, fair and more inclusive economic growth. Including some of his senior positions include the Deputy Director of the Public Governance Directorate, Chief of Staff and Counselor to the Chief Economist. And prior to joining OECD, he worked as a Senior Economist at the Fiscal Affairs Department of the International Monetary Fund. Luiz holds a PhD in economics from the University of Kent, United Kingdom. But Luiz, I'll ask you to set the scene from OECD's perspective.
Thank you very much, Ray. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in this conversation. Hello, everyone. Well, the OECD, we've been busy over the last 3 months, almost like everybody else, I guess, but focusing a lot on taking stock of what countries are doing, the initiatives that they are putting in place to deal with the effects of the crisis, and at the same time providing analysis, providing advice to policymakers in best ways, basically, to deal with that. I take the opportunity to invite you all to take a look at our COVID hub that is available on our website, and there you will find a selection of thematic notes, a stock taking of country experiences, and other material that may be of help to you all. But I would like to take the opportunity now, Ray, to basically get a couple of messages across from the beginning. One is that this crisis, as was highlighted before, is having really a dramatic effect on our economies and societies. To give you an idea, we did a very simple exercise and looked at all the sectors in our economies that are being affected by lockdowns, partial or full, by basically confinement strategies that countries have laid out. And those sectors account for about 30 or 40% of GDP in the average OECD country. I'm talking about the tourism, entertainment, parts of manufacturing, services, retailing that require direct contact between customers and service providers. So big chunks of our economies are being affected directly by that. And those sectors tend to employ a lot of people. Again, if you look at the very same sectors that are being affected by confinement strategies, they tend to employ, on average, about 40% of people in OECD countries as a whole. And a big chunk of those 40% of people, another 40% of the 40%, is basically people who have the so-called non-standard forms of work. The self-employed, the people that don't have fixed-term contracts, the self-employed, for instance. So people who are most vulnerable to job losses, people who are basically, if you want, in the gaps of social protection systems. So they tend to be a lot more vulnerable than others. If you look at firms of the very same sectors, if you take the firms that are at greater risk of being illiquid after a while, illiquid in the sense of not having revenue that is high enough to basically cover their operating costs, pay their taxes, and honor the debt obligations. That's about 20% in our calculation of firms could be in that situation a month into the crisis. About 30% could be in the same situation about four months into the crisis. So I'm just giving you these very big numbers just to illustrate there's a symmetry. It's a crisis that affects activities and sectors very unevenly, workers very unevenly, and firms very unevenly. So what's important from now on? I think one, and that's my second message to start off with, is that it's very important basically that we could move on to the support that governments are providing, and they are doing that through a variety of mechanisms that we've all been talking about for a long time. But it's important to move from that phase of support to a phase of recovery, phase of basically putting in place policies that can facilitate reallocation of resources as our economies are affected in a more long-lasting manner by this crisis, to facilitate then the recovery, to facilitate reallocation, and to make sure that then we can move on to a post-crisis phase of strong growth, strong productivity performance, and better outcomes across a variety of metrics that are important for governments and for societies alike. think I'll stop here, Ray, and happy to develop some of those arguments in the Q&A.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks very much, Luis. Yes, there's so much to cover in this, so we're going to try and keep it as brief as possible on the intro and give more time for Q&A